While the world believed Camilla had finally secured her position within the royal family, few knew what was brewing behind closed doors. A single disagreement over a young girl's education would ignite one of the most emotionally charged palace confrontations in years. What started as a quiet conversation would soon snowball into a constitutional reckoning and a mother's fury. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In the gilded aftermath of King Charles's coronation, Camilla stood at the heart of the monarchy, not merely as Queen Consort, but as a woman finally wielding the influence she had once only observed from the shadows. Her counsel was increasingly sought in matters once considered above her station: ceremonial events, patronage selections, even whispered talks about reshaping how the next generation would be raised under the crown. And when the subject of Princess Charlotte's educational path surfaced, Camilla's opinion arrived not as a suggestion, but as a declaration. She proposed a renowned progressive boarding school, favored among global elites, known for its avant-garde curriculum and liberal social values. It was a choice that seemed modern on the surface, but its deeper implications unsettled many. Inside the royal walls, where tradition hangs like heavy velvet drapes, whispers began to rise. The Queen's recommendation wasn't simply educational, it was political. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had always treaded cautiously around her stepmother-in-law, showing respect in public, restraint in private. But this time, the move felt personal. Camilla's intervention came without warning, bypassing Catherine's deeply researched plans, conversations, and even William's prior understanding. The choice of school had been a careful decision, one rooted in stability, continuity, and a curriculum designed not for aristocratic flair, but for discreet leadership. Camilla's suggestion wasn't just different, it was defiant. Sources inside the palace described the moment Catherine discovered the interference as glacial. No shouting, no theatrics, just a steely resolve beginning to form behind her eyes. If Camilla believed this decision would go uncontested, she had severely miscalculated. Meanwhile, constitutional advisors, those rarely seen, officials who preserve the monarchy's inner legality, began raising quiet concerns. Queen consorts, they reminded the king, do not possess decision-making authority over heirs. A growing sense of unease crept through the royal corridors. If Camilla's wishes were allowed to take precedence in Charlotte's life, what precedent would that set for future royal children? Would step relations begin dictating heritage-linked decisions? One member of the Queen's Council reportedly warned that such a move could complicate the monarchic line in ways no one had prepared for. But amid all the escalating murmurs, King Charles offered nothing more than silence, a knowing, pensive stillness that spoke volumes to those who understood how this palace operated. His silence was not neutrality, it was observation. And observation, in royal circles, is often the first step before decisive power is exercised. But what Camilla didn't anticipate was that her quiet maneuver would awaken a dormant power, one that had been waiting for just the right moment to reassert control. Behind her calm smile and polished presence, Catherine was raging. Not out of pride, but out of principle. She had one rule: her daughter's future would never be a pawn in royal politics. And Camilla had just crossed the line. From the moment she became a mother, Catherine had vowed to shield her children from the very machinery that had once devoured Diana. She understood the power of image, of influence, of public opinion, but above all, she understood the cost of silence in the face of quiet encroachment. Camilla's bold push to influence Charlotte's educational path wasn't seen as guidance, it was interpreted as intrusion, and for Catherine that was a line in the sand. Her private fury never cracked her public mask, but within the palace, word travelled fast. A conversation behind closed doors intended to be a diplomatic airing of concerns had turned icy. Staff recalled a meeting so tense, the temperature in the room felt as though it had dropped 10 degrees. What was supposed to be a discussion had become a declaration. Catherine would not bend. She began moving not with noise, but with precision. Trusted aides were summoned. Legal advisors were consulted. Subtle nods were given to long-standing staff loyal to her and William. In the shadows of the monarchy, alliances shifted like tectonic plates. Leaks began to emerge not from Catherine directly, but from those sympathetic to her cause. Carefully worded statements slipped into the hands of trusted reporters. Headlines began to hint: palace rift over Charlotte's school choice, a question that the press office scrambled to deny, only fueling speculation further. One source close to Kensington described Catherine as composed but resolved, noting that she considered Camilla's interference not only inappropriate but disrespectful to parental boundaries. It was a rare glimpse into a usually tight-lipped environment, and it rattled more than a few courtiers. Tensions within the royal household escalated quickly. Staff were split not along job titles but along loyalties. Those aligned with the Queen Consort whispered about the need for modernization and shared responsibility. But Catherine's loyalists viewed the intrusion as overreach, dangerous and unprecedented. Meetings were shorter, schedules more guarded. A cold formality settled between the Queen and the Princess of Wales during joint appearances. Smiles became tighter, proximity more distant. And still, the King said nothing. His silence created a vacuum, one that both women now moved to fill, though by vastly different means. Camilla with her quiet confidence in established power. Catherine with the strength of moral clarity and a mother's instinct. But as the tension simmered beneath the palace's polished surface, Catherine did what few expected. She didn't retaliate publicly. She rallied, methodically, respectfully, powerfully. And it was then, in that calculated pause between confrontation and escalation, that Camilla made a critical mistake. She underestimated the one institution that still had the power to overrule even a queen. Buried deep within a centuries-old document lies a clause forgotten by most, but never erased. And when the whispers reached the ears of a former palace advisor, the game changed entirely. Camilla had overstepped more than family boundaries. She had breached constitutional territory. As tensions between Catherine and Camilla quietly escalated, it wasn't just emotion fueling the standoff, it was legal ambiguity. Behind the curtain of royal tradition and ceremonial smiles lay a dense web of constitutional law, rituals and precedent. And somewhere within that web sat a clause few had read in generations. Known only to a handful of archivists and legal historians, it was a provision buried within an 1839 royal charter, one that addressed the governance of future sovereigns and their heirs. The clause, simple in its wording but seismic in implication, granted educational oversight of royal heirs not to their guardians, nor to the reigning monarch, but to a specific oversight body within the Privy Council. It was designed as a safeguard against undue influence, created during a time of royal upheaval, and had only been invoked twice before in modern history. Once to override Queen Victoria's preferred schooling for her grandson, and again during the reign of George VI to ensure stability during wartime succession planning. The existence of this clause might have remained forgotten if not for one observant former court advisor, long retired, but still discreetly briefed on inner court affairs. Hearing of the growing unease over Camilla's assertiveness, he quietly alerted a contact within the palace's legal office. What followed was a discreet internal review that rattled senior figures more than any headline could. If the clause was valid, and it appeared to be, it meant that Camilla's recommendation carried no legal standing. In fact, her involvement could be interpreted as a breach of long-standing royal governance practices. This wasn't just about a school anymore. It was about the very architecture of royal power. Senior royals, particularly those in advisory and constitutional roles, were stunned. The clause hadn't been discussed in decades. For many, it was a relic of a forgotten era. But now, with Catherine's camp invoking its relevance and legal aids verifying its legitimacy, it became a live wire running beneath the palace floors. Tensions that had felt personal were now institutional. There was protocol, there was precedent, and Camilla, despite her position as Queen Consort, was not above it. Discussions began behind closed doors. The Privy Council was notified. Legal drafters were briefed. And while all of this unfolded in utter secrecy, one man remained conspicuously uninvolved. The king, advised to maintain neutrality, King Charles chose silence once again. But this time, silence wasn't read as wisdom. It was interpreted as judgment. Camilla, once confident in her standing, began to sense a shift in the atmosphere. The air around her no longer felt reverent. It felt procedural. And in royal politics, when tradition becomes protocol, emotion is erased. Now the machinery of the monarchy began to turn not in Camilla's favour, but toward a cold, formal review that would question her very place in the pecking order. It wasn't televised. It wasn't announced. But inside a high-security chamber of the palace, power brokers met under oath. And at that moment, Camilla's voice, once so decisive, was reduced to a line item on a disputed agenda. The meeting convened without ceremony, without cameras, without the regal pageantry the public so often associates with the monarchy. But inside that stone-walled chamber, power was being redefined. The Privy Council, an ancient institution often dismissed as ceremonial, was suddenly alive with purpose. At the heart of their discussion sat a single haunting question: had the Queen Consort overstepped her role? For decades, the monarchy had operated under the illusion of unity, of consensus. But this case was different. The clause invoked wasn't symbolic, it was binding, and its relevance now forced every legal advisor present to confront the uncomfortable truth: Camilla's influence on Princess Charlotte's education may not just be politically sensitive, it may be constitutionally invalid. The room divided quickly. On one side stood the traditionalists, those who argued that Camilla, by virtue of her role, should be afforded some say in shaping the image and preparation of future royals. They emphasized modernization, evolution, and partnership. But on the other side, a more rigid camp held fast to precedent. The Queen Consort, they insisted, held no legal guardianship, no educational rights over heirs to the throne. Her position was symbolic, respected, yes, but ultimately excluded from matters of bloodline succession. The legal advisors were split, each interpretation grounded in different decades of royal legal history. The air was heavy with hesitation, with the awareness that whatever decision they made would not just affect a child's school but redraw the unspoken boundaries within the royal court. Then came an unexpected voice: the Lord Chamberlain. A man often seen but rarely heard, he had remained quiet through most of the debate. But when he rose, the room paused. His words were calculated, grave. He reminded the council that the role of the monarchy had survived not through popularity, but through discipline and precedent. And then, with one chilling phrase, he shifted the tide. "We do not rewrite rules to accommodate sentiment." That sentence was recorded in the council's notes, and from that point forward, the tone of the debate changed. The room leaned toward caution, toward tradition, toward containment. The question was no longer if Camilla had overreached, it was how the palace would frame her withdrawal. Details of the meeting were meant to remain sealed. But as always in royal affairs, silence is fertile ground for leaks. Fragments of the council's discussion began to trickle into the hands of select journalists. One source described the mood as deeply concerned, while another referred to the matter as a preventative measure to avoid future overreach. Most alarming, however, were rumors that Camilla had not been invited to submit her views. Princess Charlotte's future was now being decided without her, without Charles, and without warning. For a woman who had once fought her way into the inner circle of power, Camilla was being quietly, strategically edged out. By the time Camilla was informed of the council's leanings, it was already too late. The royal system had begun sealing its judgment not with a bang, but with a single signature. Delivered in a red-sealed envelope, it bore the weight of generations. An official override of Camilla's influence, backed by ancient law and modern urgency. And when the Queen opened it, the message was unmistakable: step back. It arrived not with a confrontation, but with cold finality. The decision from the Privy Council, rooted in the very foundation of royal law, was clear and unyielding. Educational decisions concerning heirs to the throne belonged solely to their biological guardians. There would be no compromise, no appeal. Camilla's proposed school, her bold attempt to usher Princess Charlotte into a new chapter of elite international learning, was struck down in a single, surgically precise stroke. In its place stood a quiet, discreet institution backed by Catherine's family lineage, steeped in tradition and devoid of the spotlight Camilla had hoped to cultivate. The ruling did not mention names, it did not assign blame, but in its silence it screamed. This was more than a legal interpretation, it was a power correction. Within hours of the decision, the palace released a carefully worded statement emphasizing a unified front and collaborative decision-making. But behind those words, the fractures were undeniable. Camilla, whose rise to queenship had been paved through years of carefully navigated loyalty and patience, found herself blindsided. For someone who had spent decades being sidelined and then slowly clawed her way into legitimacy, this moment was more than a setback, it was a humiliation. Sources close to her describe a chilling sense of betrayal, not just from the institution, but from the man who stood at the center of it all, King Charles. He had not intervened, he had not protested, he had watched. And that silence, once dismissed as royal detachment, now felt like complicity. Those closest to the Queen reported she was stunned, then steeled, retreating into a tight circle of loyal aides while maintaining a calm exterior. But the whispers inside Clarence House painted a more vivid picture, Camilla pacing, questioning, demanding clarity on how such a decision could be made without her voice, her role, her recognition. For Charles, the weight of the crown had never felt heavier. Torn between a wife whose dignity had been publicly diminished and a son whose family had just won a quiet but critical victory, he found himself walking a diplomatic tightrope with no safe end in sight. Meanwhile, royal communications teams scrambled to contain the story. Journalists were given vague confirmations, leaks were blocked. Photos of Camilla and Catherine attending the same charity event were circulated to signal peace. But peace, in the royal world, is often a performance, and those close to the palace knew what was really unfolding behind the curtains. A decision had been made, but its impact was just beginning to take shape. The Queen had been overruled, her influence had been clipped, and worse, it had been done legally, officially, and irrevocably. But suppressing a decision is not the same as healing a wound, and Camilla's fury was just beginning to find its outlet. She may have lost the battle, but Camilla wasn't about to retreat quietly. Her next move would not involve education at all, but something far more subtle, far more sinister. Influence is a currency, and she was about to spend it. Within days of the council's ruling, Camilla re-emerged not broken, but sharpened. If her opinions could be overruled by dusty charters and family politics, she would shift the terrain entirely. She began where few noticed, the staffing rosters, a quiet reshuffle, a name removed from an inner circle list, a familiar face reassigned without explanation. One such departure caused ripples. A trusted aide of Catherine, a woman known for managing press relations and shielding the princess from damaging leaks, was suddenly transferred to a strategic role outside London. No explanation was offered, no protest was accepted. The message, though unspoken, was loud. The Queen still held sway, just not where people thought to look. What followed next was orchestrated with precision. News outlets began releasing op-eds and features subtly reframing Camilla's image not as a bypassed stepmother, but as a visionary force behind a more modern monarchy. Royal commentators, often given behind-the-scenes access, began praising her steady hand, her quiet dignity, and her alleged role in maintaining stability amid rising family tension. One article went so far as to describe her as the unseen anchor of the monarchy, a piece suspiciously timed to counter the narrative of a woman outmaneuvered. Palace insiders whispered that these pieces were not organic, they were placements, carefully approved and encouraged by those close to Camilla. Public appearances also told a story. Where Catherine and Camilla had once shared smiles and subtle gestures of unity, there was now a chill. Their engagements were carefully choreographed to minimize overlap, their seating plans adjusted, their schedules curiously non-aligned. Catherine, ever the professional, remained composed. But those who watched closely could sense the growing void. Camilla wasn't seeking reconciliation, she was constructing a new narrative, one in which Catherine appeared cold, closed off, overly traditional. Meanwhile, Camilla played the role of the progressive elder, the woman ready to usher in change if only allowed the space. The pressure intensified as private whispers made their way into tabloid headlines. Stories emerged hinting at Prince William's growing frustration with internal meddling. Sources cited tensions behind palace walls and disagreements on strategy. While nothing was confirmed, and William offered no public comment, the ambiguity allowed speculation to fester. Kensington Palace found itself firefighting stories that, just weeks ago, would have been unthinkable. The image of unity was being chipped away slowly, deliberately, and with the Queen's fingerprints nowhere near the scene. And yet Camilla's most cunning move wasn't in reshuffling staff or guiding narratives. It was in how she surrounded herself. A network of seasoned advisors, media strategists, and former officials began to orbit her private office. Some called it coincidence. Others called it the rise of a new court within a court. Unlike the structured, lineage-bound institution of old, this circle operated in nuance, influence, and perception. It was not bound by law. It was bound by leverage. And in the royal family, leverage is sometimes more powerful than lineage. But even as Camilla maneuvered, a storm was forming elsewhere, one that would draw global attention and force the palace to publicly choose sides. No one knows who leaked them. But suddenly, a set of confidential notes detailing Charlotte's rejected school offer appeared online, complete with comments from Camilla's private secretary. The internet exploded, and the monarchy was plunged into chaos. The documents were never meant for public eyes. Contained within were internal assessments of Princess Charlotte's educational options, stamped with palace insignia, and annotated with notations allegedly written by Camilla's most trusted aide. Among the revelations were phrases like "Her Majesty prefers a more cosmopolitan curriculum," and "Catherine may be too cautious in her approach to modern schooling." That single phrase, "Her Majesty prefers," was all it took. Social media erupted. Commentators accused the Queen Consort of elitism, manipulation, and attempting to impose a private agenda on a child whose life was already under public scrutiny. It was no longer an internal royal disagreement. It had become a public relations firestorm, broadcast across every headline and dissected on every broadcast. Within hours, hashtags began trending. #LetKateDecide and #HandsOffCharlotte. Influencers, journalists, even former MPs weighed in, questioning how much influence a step-relative should wield over the upbringing of a future monarch. Memes mocked Camilla as the queen of interference. Satirical sketches portrayed her as a puppet master, pulling strings behind royal curtains. It was brutal, relentless, and unforgiving. The palace, already shaken by the previous internal rulings, found itself forced into damage control. For the first time in years, Catherine's office released a public statement subtle in tone but cutting in implication. It spoke of the right of parents to shape their children's futures without political intrusion, a line interpreted globally as a direct rebuke to Camilla's maneuvering. Ins. The royal walls, panic met fury. Charles was reportedly blindsided by the leak, demanding to know who had allowed such sensitive material to reach the press. Camilla, meanwhile, was said to be devastated, convinced she was being targeted, if not betrayed. Theories about the source of the leak exploded. Was it a loyalist trying to defend Camilla's vision before it was erased from history? Or was it a whistleblower, someone within the system, who believed too much power was being wielded by someone unelected and unrelated by blood? Whatever the answer, the damage was done. Trust inside the palace was obliterated. Security protocols were tightened. Private servers were swept for traces of unauthorized access. But it wasn't just the royal family that wanted answers, the public was demanding them too. An online petition quickly gained traction, calling for transparency around the roles of non-parental figures in royal children's lives. "We deserve to know who shapes our monarchy's future," the petition read, echoing the sentiment of millions who felt that this wasn't just a family dispute. It was a national concern. In cafes, on talk shows, even in Parliament's corridors, the topic surged. The firm was cornered. Forced to acknowledge internal dissonance it had spent years concealing, the palace stood exposed, its divisions laid bare by one digital breach. And just when it seemed the family would implode, one unexpected royal made a move that changed everything. Royal protocol demands silence. But Prince William shattered it with 10 carefully chosen words in an off-the-cuff interview, words that made it clear where he stood. And the fallout? Earth-shaking. It happened during what should have been an innocuous engagement, an event to support children's mental health. one of William's long-standing causes. As he left the venue, a reporter called out, a question seemingly casual, but razor-sharp in implication. "How do you feel about the recent discussions around Princess Charlotte's schooling?" For a split second, it seemed William would offer the standard royal deflection, a smile or a no comment. But instead, without hesitation, he turned, smiled faintly and said, "We do what's best for our children." 10 words, no names, no accusations, but the message, blisteringly clear. He wasn't speaking as the heir to the throne. He was speaking as a father, and he was standing behind his wife. The reaction was instant. Social media platforms lit up. News channels broke into live coverage. Analysts passed every syllable, every pause, every micro-expression. But the interpretation was unanimous. William had chosen a side, and it wasn't Camilla's. In homes across Britain, his words resonated as both a defense and a declaration. For Catherine, it was a moment of vindication. For the monarchy, it was a rupture made public. The palace issued no clarification, no retraction, but internally, alarm bells rang. That same evening, reports surfaced that King Charles had summoned both William and Camilla for a private meeting at Clarence House. No official agenda, no aides permitted, just a father, a son, and a queen, locked in a conversation that would never be recorded but would echo through royal history. By morning, a storm had broken through the palace's gates. Camilla was seen leaving Clarence House, her face taut, her expression unreadable. No statements followed, no photographs were released. But the silence screamed of fallout. Insiders whispered of raised voices, of Charles caught between two worlds, his bloodline and his marriage forced to reconcile the irreconcilable. William's words, while measured, had punctured the monarchy's golden rule: never explain, never complain. And in doing so, he had exposed the fracture that lay beneath the royal facade. That fracture only widened as public support surged behind the Prince and Princess of Wales. Polls showed overwhelming sympathy for Catherine. Editorials lauded William's honesty and strength. Even former critics of the monarchy acknowledged the human element behind his statement. Here was a future king defending his daughter not just against the media or the public, but against internal pressure from within his own family. It was a defining moment not just for William as a father, but for the monarchy's next chapter. He had rewritten the narrative in real time, and in doing so, pulled the curtain back on a truth the palace had desperately tried to control. Yet even after the dust settled and the headlines faded, one question remained: what would this mean for Camilla's legacy and Charlotte's future role? The Queen Consort once thought history would remember her as the woman who endured. But after this controversy, her legacy had shifted. Not as a peacemaker, but as a challenger to bloodlines and as a symbol of overreach. In the final act of this silent royal war, it became painfully clear that Camilla's legacy had veered off the path she had spent decades forging. She had once been seen as the figure who overcame adversity, weathered public scorn, and emerged beside Charles with grace. But now, cracks had formed in that carefully rebuilt image. The education saga had left its mark on the family, on the institution, and most of all, on her. Among traditional royalists, the whispers grew louder. That Camilla had forgotten her station, that she had tried to wield a power that was never hers. And among reformists, even those sympathetic to her journey, the narrative shifted. Was she modernizing the monarchy or manipulating it? The contrast between the two royal camps was never starker. On one side, Camilla stood surrounded by advisors, watching her credibility wane behind the palace walls, her decisions scrutinized through a new lens of suspicion. On the other, Charlotte emerged not just as a child of the future, but as a symbol of protective parenting in an archaic institution. Catherine, once dubbed the silent strength, was now lionized as the vigilant mother who refused to allow her daughter to become a pawn. And William? He had transcended the role of heir and become the people's father figure, grounded, unwavering, and unapologetically decisive. Public support shifted visibly and swiftly. Every appearance of the Wales family drew crowds. Every gesture from Catherine was dissected and praised. Royal watchers noted the increasing frequency of joint engagements between William and Catherine, a deliberate message of unity, and an unspoken contrast to the absence of Camilla from similar platforms. No statements were made, but the message was clear: the center of royal gravity had moved. and it had not moved in Camilla's favor. Behind the scenes, royal historians began quietly documenting the events. Journals that had once focused on royal weddings and jubilees now included entire sections on the Charlotte Clause and the education controversy. Academics debated whether this moment would mark the beginning of a new interpretation of the Queen Consort's role. Others argued that it would be remembered as a moment of institutional recalibration when bloodlines reasserted themselves against external influence. But among those whispers, one question remained persistent and unsettling. Had Camilla inadvertently shaped the very narrative she once sought to escape? And as for Charlotte, her name now carried a weight far beyond her years. Rumors swirled that this decision would define her public role in the decades to come, that the firm, having seen the chaos caused by outside influence, would double down on shielding her path. That the girl once caught in a quiet tug-of-war would grow to embody a new generation of fiercely protected, emotionally grounded heirs. It was no longer just about schooling. It was about identity, legacy, and a future forged in resistance. And as the next generation rises, one thing becomes clear. In the royal family, every decision echoes through time and every power move leaves a scar. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.